Hello and welcome to Guthrie, Oklahoma.
Birthplace of Oklahoma's first capital and newspaper.
My name is Lynn Bilodeau. I am CEO of the State Capitol Publishing Museum. We're here in beautiful downtown Guthrie, Oklahoma, and we are in the State Capitol Publishing Museum building. This building was built in 1902, has a lot of very unique features, and it holds a lot of Oklahoma history, both through the territory on into statehood. We're in what we call the south wing of this building. It's a very small part of it. Right below us are the old original coal-fired boilers. And I remember a couple years ago, the first time I walked into this room, I was really surprised because the wall just to the left of me looks like an exterior wall. And it's obviously we're inside, so it's not an exterior wall. And I asked my friend Nathan why that looked like an exterior wall. I thought this room had been added on. And Nathan informed me that this building was built in such a way so that if there was a mechanical fire from the boilers underneath us, that this part of the building would just catch on fire, burn, fall off, saving the main part of the building.
The original State Capitol newspaper building was on this site, and it burned to the ground Easter Sunday in 1902.
This building, from Easter Sunday morning 1902, when they decided to rebuild, until it opened by the end of October 1902, was less than 7 months. And it is amazing that they built this structure in such a short period of time without modern machinery. The craftsmanship on this building is absolutely amazing. When you see a picture from the outside of it, you see these very large windowsills under each of the windows that open and shut. Each of those looks like a cast piece of concrete, but it's not. Each one is a solid block of limestone that was hand chiseled into that shape for that particular window. We have 143 windows in this building that open and shut. Altogether, 162 windows in this building, and for them to accomplish all that, I can't imagine getting some masons together and just getting the windowsills built in 7 months, but they built this whole building complete with a full basement. You'll see some of the features of it as we go through this. These are one set of the steel doors. These, I'm sure, were kept closed all the time during business hours so that, again, if there was a fire, the fire would not spread into the main part of the building. So there's sets where the windows are, there's sets where this walkway door is, and these are sitting here pretty rusty looking. They have aged quite a bit over the years, but pretty much right where they sat in 1902 when they opened the building.
This is call it the cage, where business was transacted. A lot of people, when they've come into the building, they think, well, did you get this out of a bank? Well, no, this was original to the building, but it was made by a company, the Joseph Niddle Showcase Company out of Quincy, Illinois, who supplied cases to banks and different businesses and such. So that's why you have a little bit of the look.
This cage area is really unique. I mean, this must have been a really bustling business from 1902 till at least 1910.
This glass is commonly referred to as glue glass. It's a technique to put the crackle in, which I think is very, very attractive.
There's a different window for the cashier, one if you needed to get subscriptions, another one if you were going to order up advertising. The assistant manager's window is where you would have gone to order forms. This building didn't just house newspaper printing equipment, which you will see in a little bit. It's down in the basement and it is spectacular, but it handled all kinds of printing. Frank Greer had printing contracts with the court clerks from all over the state of Oklahoma. This wall is one of my favorite features in this building. There are behind me 624 drawers. No two drawers have the same content. These are all of the pre-printed forms that were sold to county clerks, court clerks, and law offices all over the state of Oklahoma. They would come and they would look into this book to see where that form was located. One of the more interesting pieces in here that we found is an affidavit of application for citizenship, and you can see the pre-printed date on this is AD 190. meaning that this was printed before 1910. If it was after 1910, it would have been 191 something for them to fill in the blank. This looks pretty spindly to me. I don't know that a full-size man would want to climb that ladder. It's still intact. This is the original ladder. We have 4, maybe 5 of these in here to get to things that are on shelves or, like I said, drawers. The floor in this room is also really spectacular. It doesn't just grab you. It's not as vibrant as the modern flooring is, but this floor is original to the building. It was also refinished by Oklahoma Historical Society a few decades ago. You can walk around this floor for 10 or 15 minutes searching in vain to find one knothole. I'm not sure if this is pine or Douglas fir, but it is just amazing to find this much milled wood for flooring that doesn't even have a knothole in it anywhere. We're standing here in front of another very unique feature of this building. As we mentioned earlier, the previous structure that housed the printing concern burned to the ground Easter Sunday morning 1902. When this one was built, the concern for fire wasn't just strong enough to include a wing that would fall off if the boilers ever caught fire, but also included a fireproof safe on every floor. And we're standing inside that caged area in the back corner, and this is one of the fireproof safes. You can see the wall to this safe is about 30 inches thick. This is encased in concrete all the way around. One set of very small steel doors on the inside, and then a much larger, over half-inch thick steel door right here, so that if there was a fire, precious things that had been stored in that room would be spared from the fire. This isn't the only fireproof safe in the building. There is one on every floor, even the basement. Right below us, this has a common shaft that goes all the way from the basement all the way up to the roof, and every floor has a fireproof safe this same size. Even on the fireproof safe, there's little gold pinstriping and decorative gold pinstriping on the top of this doorway. Just another example of the beautiful craftsmanship from that era. I'm going to let my friend Nathan tell you about this ceiling. It is just amazing. It's the original tin ceiling to this building.
Back in that day, tin ceilings were fairly common, but this one was very, very elaborate. The colors that you see are, to our knowledge, what the original colors were. I can tell you for sure the colors on the wall are as close to what was original as we could get. In 1999, actually, for the walls, we removed the baseboards. There was paint behind the baseboards that we were able to take scrapings of and take it down and have it matched. We oftentimes think of the Victorian era as being drab and dull and no fun, but then you see these vibrant colors and this art on the ceilings, and
each one is a work of art. I guess I'd describe this as salmon and seafoam, something along those lines, although, you know, these days they give colors all kinds of odd names. But it's just beautiful. It's really something to behold, and we have Oklahoma Historical Society to thank for restoring this tin ceiling when they did. It's another great feature of this building. We're standing in front of one of many of the original radiators in this building. This building has never had modern heat and air installed in it. It worked originally off of coal-fired boilers for many, many years. I believe it was sometime in the 70s that was converted to natural gas boiler. Natural gas boiler was still heating this building up until 2012. Had many repairs done to it over the years, and finally gave up the ghost, and that's when OHS was unable to afford, after budget cuts, they were unable to afford getting a new boiler put in. And that's one of the issues we have to address with this building is what are we going to do with the heat and air? We think that long term we're going to have to do some kind of modern heat and air if we're going to actually use the building 12 months a year. But we definitely want to keep these radiators, and I'd still like to have a boiler system, even if it's only supplemental heat. I'd still like to see the boilers in use to some degree. They're just a work of art the way they are, and the best we know, they've never been refinished. They've never been taken out, sandblasted, painted, or anything like that. This is the finish that was on them back in October 1902 when the building opened. You think that's right, Nathan?
I believe that's correct. Mm-hmm. These are called mealy presses. They were brought in here in the 1920s, essentially. when the original presses were, outdated and they needed something a little bit more modern. And they would use these to print large-scale print jobs. For instance, they have a newspaper there, kind of showing you what that would look like. In this press, someone from the OHS printed the proclamation to allow Oklahoma to become a state, which was sold at different points throughout the history. These were operated from up here, and you would actually have an individual taking the paper and sliding it down. It would print and spit out at the back end, and there'd be another person there grabbing the paper and stacking it. Some of these machines, at times, they would use natural gas heaters to help dry the ink so that they didn't smudge quite as bad. If you can imagine these all running at one time, it's quite loud down here in the press room.
We're standing in front of one of the many different kinds of cabinets that were down here in the press room and all over the building. There's also a lot of cabinets upstairs where bookbinding was done, but these are simply little spacers that went between two lines of print. We'll look in just a little bit at linotypes. We have 7 linotypes in this basement. The linotype was invented in 1884 and really revolutionized the printing industry. Even your largest newspapers around the country would seldom be more than 8 pages before the linotype. Every letter had to be hand set one at a time into the large, what they call a chase, the case that would hold those letters together while they were getting it over to the printer. When the linotype came along, there was a big 90-key keyboard where they could just type into the lead that had just been molded and was still soft all the different letters, so they could create a whole linotype a whole lot faster than somebody could put it in one at a time. We'll look at some chases and how those were put together, but very interesting how phrases and words get coined over the years. The terms that we use to describe a small letter and a capital letter in this country, we usually refer to as uppercase and lowercase, and that's because in the printing industry, those larger capital letters were kept up in the upper part of the case and the other ones were in the lower part of the case. Nathan, in just a little bit, is going to explain to you how those linotype leads were put into chases and then taken over to the presses.
So this is the final product of the linotype machine. Each of the magazines had the alphabet in them, and as they typed, it would create a line of type, hence the name. And then once you had your, let's say, your story that you were working on for the newspaper, it would go into a form, and you'd build this so that you could print a newspaper, or even for the forms that we saw on the first floor would all be put together in the same way.
Each one of these work tables down here, and I haven't even counted how many there are, probably 8 to a dozen, have these beautiful original stone tops on them so they could put the chases together and get them over to the printing presses, because if these things weren't perfectly flat, they weren't going to print very well on a printing press. This is one of my favorite rooms. You can definitely tell OSHA was not in charge at the time. We showed you linotypes and how they would type out a whole line of type on a lead blank. Those blanks then became slugs because they were single use only. So some poor guy got to walk around the building all day collecting all of the old slugs in this rudimentary wheelbarrow. Wheel it back here, those slugs would get put into this smelter. We don't know what year the hood was added, but originally there was no exit strategy for the lead fumes in here. It would have just been open the windows and hope most of it blows out. That lead was smelted down. We still have ladles. There's a whole group of ladles and different tools that were used to do this. They would pour the molten lead into these blanks and make these great big ingots that could then be used and hung onto each linotype, because each one of the linotype machines had its own little smelter, and as you used it, that would be lowered into that smelter. I have a really good friend, Tony Cable, that's actually used a linotype before, and he talked about how you have to really be quick sometimes because that little smelter would burp from time to time, and as soon as you heard that noise, you better get out of the way or you're going to get a lap full of lead.
To operate the coal-fired boilers, you obviously needed coal, and this is how it was brought into the building. This has now been closed off, what have you, but it actually exits the building and goes further outside so that when your wagon would come by with coal, they could shovel it here into the building, and you'd have coal all through here so that the boiler man could take it into the actual boiler.
This building was donated to the Oklahoma Historical Society in about 1975, and you are getting a rare glimpse of anything that's not in the basement or the first floor. All the way from 1975 to the present, this second floor and then the third floor above us never been open to the public. Restoration's never been completed here. This is one of our goals, is to get this floor and the third floor both restored. This floor, and especially this office, is especially significant to the state of Oklahoma. We're standing in what's actually a small suite of offices where Frank Greer had his office. November the 16th in 1907, the telegram from Teddy Roosevelt came through the teletype into this office announcing that Oklahoma was going to be the next state in the Union.
It was on this balcony where statehood was announced for Oklahoma on November 16th, 1907.
Most stories have a good, a bad, and an ugly. This building is no exception. We've shown you much of the good: fabulous architecture, rare artifacts, glorious history. People come in and look at the first floor and they think, hey, this building isn't so bad. While a few things have been restored, only the proverbial surface has been scratched. Don't be fooled. The truth is, this building teeters on the precipice of being lost to history. Many historic buildings in Oklahoma have been lost to history because no one cared enough to invest the time and the money necessary to bring them back. To save this building will take commitment, time, and most of all, money. If we cannot raise the money to save this building and its contents, this building will likely perish. This building is not only useful as a museum that can educate today's youth in a hands-on way to see what their ancestors had to do to get things into print, things they do with a computer or smartphone today with just a few keystrokes. There is a lot of unused office space that could be rented to like-minded organizations. There are large rooms that could be used for community events, but without funds, none of that can happen. We have identified nearly $7 million in needed repairs, refurbishment, and updating needs. All 143 of the windows that open and close need to be replaced. Most of the inner window sills are rotting away. Much of the lath and plaster ceiling on the top floor has fallen off from previous water damage. The building has no heat, let alone modern HVAC. Just to fix the current heating system would cost in excess of $160,000, and the building would still be without air conditioning. Installing a modern pedestrian elevator that will make us ADA compliant could cost up to $500,000. The fire escape does not meet code. We need to add a fire escape. The building needs significant carpentry and masonry work. We have piles and piles of books and papers and other artifacts, some mixed in with trash on the second and third floors. We need to go through all of those things, separating the trash from the treasure. This beautiful building, where statehood was announced, has stood for almost 118 years. We would like to see it saved, preserved, and restored so that it is still standing in better shape than it is now in another 100 years. We need your help. If we don't save it, who will? I can tell you who will. No one.